My day job slowed down after the last case I took with Nick. It was 2 weeks and he was still under house arrest. Forbidden to go on another case until he recovered. The last case he had displayed a power no one was aware of. Not even himself. I would send him texts which he replied to seconds after. And I could tell he was very bored at home even though all his messages sounded neutral. I wasn't busy when Nick called. He only called if he was asking for a job. As far as I knew, he was still stuck at home and shouldn't be asking for help for a job. "Can I ask a favor?" Nick asked when I answered the call. I wasn't expecting that. Nick was the type to never ask something that wasn't for work. A personal favor was a big deal. "Yeah, of course. What's going on?" I asked, a bit worried about this change. "It's not too big of an issue, but it requires you to come over to my home. Are you free today? I can explain everything once you get here." This was weird. Far weirder than witches in the woods or trolls under bridges. I would go over to see him, but I couldn't shake the feeling this was a bit of a big deal. "I'm not busy. Where do you live?" "That's a bit complicated." That wasn't a comforting statement. He explained he would have someone pick me up from the front of my apartment, due to what was stored inside his house. No one was able to know where it was located. Only the higher-ups in the corporation and his driver were able to go to his place. A black car with tinted windows drove up in front of my apartment building. I didn't know a lot about cars, but I knew this kind cost a fortune. The car smelled new inside, and I almost felt guilty for sitting on the leather seat. The driver didn't even look at me. We drove off, the tinted windows making it impossible to see. For a moment, I felt a lurch in my stomach. I knew the corporation could connect 2 doorways for easier travel, but wasn't aware of any ways to transport cars. We only drove for 10 minutes, making me think we were magically teleported somewhere in the world. There was no way Nick lived so close by. I thanked the silent driver and got out of the car. Whatever kind of place I thought Nick lived inside, it was never this. The car left me behind, staring with my mouth open at his house. It wasn't even a house. It was a mansion. It looked Victorian in nature and ridiculously detailed. I bet the front doors were made of wood that cost more than what I would ever make in my lifetime. I was winded by the time I made it up the polished stone steps, which I suspected to be marble. Nick was waiting for me and opened the door before I knocked. "Hey, Jack Nicholson, how are you?" I trailed off when I looked at him. I had been sure he only owned suits. Yet he was standing there wearing baggy sweatpants and a pale pink oversized sweater. His hair was pulled back in a white bandana. "Did you get new clothes?" I asked, looking at him. "How did you know?" Reaching over, I pulled off a sticker from his pants, showing the size. He must have just gotten the set of clothing if he hadn't taken the tags off yet. I followed him inside and was awed by his place again. I just couldn't believe Nicky lived in a place like this. I always assumed he was a minimalist and would never own so much stuff. The flooring was made of pristine marble tiles with glittering lines of grout that appeared to be gold. I didn't want to think about the amount of real gold that was set in his floor. There was a complex and beautiful mural of the planets which was labeled in a language I didn't understand. Some bigger stars were included and labeled as well. I paused at a centerpiece covered with clutter. Some vases and other kinds of pottery were laid out in a random order and covered the entire table, which was draped with deep purple silk. The more I looked, the more I saw the rich details of the home. I heard a small sound and my eyes traveled towards it. A cat walked across the other side of the room, paws patting across the flooring. At first, I thought it was a normal cat wearing something on its head. When it turned its face towards me, I jumped back, knocking a vase off the table. The cat had a human face with a bowl cut and cat ears on the top of its head. Orange eyes stared in my direction. The creature didn't care for me and kept walking. "Are you all right?" Nick asked as he walked back to the table. "Why, yeah, your cat startled me. I'm sorry about your vase. Was it expensive?" I bent down to try and clean up the pieces, but Nick stopped me. "No, it wasn't. I just buy cheap souvenirs whenever I go on a job. Don't worry about it either way. As long as all the pieces are there, I can repair it as if it was never broken." "I should have warned you about Charles. I forgot people have never seen a cat like her," he explained as I straightened up. "Her. I was unaware not all names are unisex until recently," he said, and that explained a little bit about him. "I didn't notice what time it is. I need to feed the twins quickly, then we can speak in the kitchen." The twins. Did he own more pets? I thought back to our last case and the pair of lizards with a shudder. I still haven't recovered from the horrors of that job. I followed behind Nick, not certain if he wanted me to stick with him or not. We walked through a long hallway covered in paintings. Some looked ancient, while others were leaning against the floor and had thrift store tags on them. He opened a door to one of the rooms and a blast of humid air hit my face. The room was covered with plants, the entire space converted into a reptile enclosure. He went to some shelves to take out the food for his pets, and I jumped back when I saw what was looking at me through the plants. "You kept them?" I asked. appalled that Nick had the twin lizards from our last case in his house. Well, yes, they won't turn back and are of no threat to others. If I didn't take them, they would be killed and examined. I'm not home very often, so I may need to hire someone to care for them. Or find a better owner. Each lizard came out from the bushes to eat from his hands. I was dumbfounded. This pair nearly killed us. They could have done even worse. I still had a scar on my face, and yet Nick could see past all that. He was a better person than I was. That was for sure. I would be unable to see these lizards as anything but the monsters they were before. He gave them a checkup to ensure they were healthy, and to ensure he could leave them alone for a while longer, leading me to the kitchen. I found a stool to sit in as he got ready to tell me the reason I was called over. His kitchen was modern compared to the rest of the house, one that looked as if it should be in the home of a celebrity instead of a lowly agent. Mickey was loaded. The room was warm and smelled of baking. Along the marble counters were 3 rows of quiches that appeared to be of different types and flavors. Nick was cleaning a spot on the counter, making it clear he was cooking before I arrived. Do you want something to eat while I talk? He offered. Normally I didn't like quiche all that much as I wasn't very into pie crusts, but this was something my partner made. I needed to try it. I nodded and he placed a slice on a gold-trimmed plate. The flavor appeared to be chosen at random. Honestly, I didn't like quiche until I had his. Pie crust never tasted so good. Looking over at all the others he had cooling off, I could tell he had a lot of practice. I've been stuck at home for over a week. It's boring and I may have gone overboard on the cooking, Nick explained, following my gaze. After the counter was cleared, he started making tea. I've learned more about my partner in the past few minutes than I had in our 4 cases together. I didn't know how to feel about that. I really never saw you as the type to cook or bake, I said, still not getting over what I was seeing. I like baking. It's similar to alchemy. He noticed my confused face and went on. The reason why this house is so hidden away is because it belonged to a master alchemist. Below this mansion is a place dubbed the Catacombs. It's a deep maze where he did his work. Most of it remains. His projects half finished and knowledge hidden away for good reasons. I was created in the lowest level and the only remaining living experiment. I nearly choked on the tea he set down in front of me. This was a lot at once. I didn't know anything about alchemy besides the base things most people were aware of. Nick was speaking in a distant tone. I was glad he trusted me enough to tell me these things, but wanted to know why he was suddenly revealing stuff that should be classified. You don't sound very fond of the place, and yet you like baking, I asked. I didn't even notice how quick I'd finished my food. I refused another piece and he placed the plate in the sink. Charles jumped up on my lap, startling me. The human face was nerve-wracking to look at, but when she curled up, I found I could tolerate her being there. I suppose I like it because I can understand it. Alchemy makes sense. It's an equal exchange of matter. Unlike magic, which creates something from nothing. Baking, you put your ingredients together, add heat and time. If you've done it correctly, you created something. Alchemy is like that. You can create almost anything if you sacrifice what's needed. That made sense for someone who was made based on more logic-based process. Magic must seem complicated. I thought about what I knew about alchemy. Didn't Nicholas something or other make a philosopher's stone? That must be where Nick got his name. I paused with my cup of tea hovering in the air. The troll called Nick a half-finished stone. If someone was able to create something even half as powerful as the philosopher's stone, they would want to keep that hidden. I quickly set my cup down, hoping Nick didn't notice the change in my mood. I was almost certain I'd figured out what he was, but didn't bring it up. If he wanted me to know, he would tell me. You haven't told me why you needed me over, I brought up. Oh, you're right. I bring in animals or supernatural creatures to keep safe until I can rehome them. Most of them would be killed unless I do so. I really shouldn't be doing this, so no one can know about Charles or the pet that went missing recently. Missing? I questioned while looking at the human-faced cat. I didn't think it would be good if any of these creatures got loose, even if he thought they were harmless. I have an owner lined up for her, but I haven't been able to find Gregory in the main house or on the grounds. She can't go beyond the barrier keeping this place hidden. The only other place she could be in is the catacombs. If that's the case, I cannot find her on my own. That place, it's impossible for me to find my way around. Even if I walk in a straight line, I get lost. I was never meant to come out of there. The distant tone in his voice came back. He glanced out the window and into the bright sunlight filling the kitchen. The window was open a little, letting a breeze flutter the sheer curtains. It was an ordinary moment, but one Nick assumed he would never see at some point. And yet, he was ready to go back down into the dark place of his past to find a lost pet. Do you really need to come along with me? I can go down on my own and look for a... What is Gregory anyway? After seeing he owned an odd cat and a pair of lizards that nearly killed us, Gregory could be anything. He paused, wondering how to describe her. She's a spider, about the size of a dinner plate. He raised his hands up, trying to give me an idea of the size. I tensed and Charles sensed it. She jumped from my lap and I felt the keys trying to come back up. I hated spiders. I hated them so much. The idea there might be one of that size roaming this house made me jumpy and my skin itch. You're not afraid of spiders, are you? Nope, I replied. That was the biggest lie of my life. But this was a favor for Nick. He never asks for anything, so finding his lost spider was the least I could do. I would have him with me so he could catch it. I would look for the thing, not touch it. With everything settled, I got ready to start looking for one of my worst nightmares. Nick grabbed some slip-on tennis shoes and put them on. His comfy clothing was still an adjustment to see. We left the kitchen behind, and a feeling of dread settled in my stomach. Since the place was so huge, it took us a while to walk to the middle of the house. The entrance to the catacombs was hidden behind an ornate door decorated with more gold. If the one who made this place was an alchemist, all this gold had to be real. I heard once that there was only enough gold on the planet to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was one of those facts you heard in your youth, believed it to be true, and never thought or questioned it again. And yet, this house alone had triple that amount. The door needed to be opened using a hefty key, as well as some of Nick's blood that he got from pricking his finger. Gears turned as the gold murals moved and the doors opened on their own. The room beyond glittered so brightly I needed to cover my eyes before they adjusted. Nick's footsteps echoed over the glass flooring. The round room had a glass dome ceiling to let light pour through. It reflected off the floor and the massive crystals surrounding the room. Each crystal pillar along the wall nearly reached the ceiling, and they shone a transparent golden yellow. This alchemist definitely had a favorite color. More circle murals made of delicate gold were inlaid into the glass. I couldn't understand what any of it meant. It all appeared ancient and magical to my eyes. One panel of the glass was missing. That was an easy entry point for a spider to go inside if it got into the room to start with. I stopped in the middle of the room with Nick looking around, trying to take in all the details. This place is crazy, I said, unable to help myself. That's one word to describe it. Oddly enough, he almost sounded bitter. Taking my hand, he started to wrap a ribbon around my wrist. Then he tied it to his own so we were connected. I raised my eyebrow, questioning the process. Really? I asked. Really? He confirmed. Nicky must really have a hard time down below if he needed to be literally attached to me as we wandered around looking for his pet. I didn't see any way of getting beyond the glass. The how was answered shortly as Nick pricked his finger again to let a drop of blood hit a small ruby set into the floor in the middle of the circle we stood in. Something jerked below our feet and the glass started to descend. We both appeared nervous for different reasons. I didn't want to find the spider and Nick didn't want to return to his past. At least we were together to face this journey. The space below wasn't as dark as I assumed it would be. It was made of dark stone. The glass clicked down and Nick hesitated to step forward, as I ended up being the one to guide him along down the few steps and deeper into the catacombs. Our footsteps echoed as we carefully made our way to a carved stone railing. The catacombs were a circle, each floor with a set number of arched doorways embedded into the stone walls. To get to the next level, there was an opening to a set of stairs next to the railing. I looked over trying to see the bottom but only saw darkness. This place would take years to fully search. I could only hope that Spider would come to us. I started towards the first door and felt tension on the ribbon. Nick was trying to walk the other way, looking disoriented. Sorry, I looked away from you and got lost, he said after he recovered and started to follow my steps again. He wasn't joking about this place messing with his sense of direction. Unless he was looking directly at me, he no longer could find his way. How he ever got out of the catacombs in the first place was a mystery. Opening the first wooden door, I looked inside the room. Dust kicked up into the air. Oddly enough, I could see just fine. Some sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, but it was dim. The room had a wooden table and stacks of old tomes rotting away on top. I didn't bother looking at them. There were 3 more doorways, one on the left, right, and in the back of the small room. I understood the doors connected to the rooms on either side, but didn't know just how far back this went. I decided to do all the rooms in a circle. Once we made it back to this one, we would start checking the back rooms until we ran out. I picked the right, opening the door to see more of the same. Scrolls and a rotted, half-collapsed wooded shelf. This room also had a door in the back of the room. Even with the door closed, I could see in the dim room. We don't have any flashlights, so why can I see so well? I asked. As far as I was aware, I didn't pick up any abilities to see in the dark. The one who created this place had a mage friend who owed him a favor. There is a spell running through this entire place, making it so the light is the same as a night of the full moon. But it only is in the same room you're inside. If you open a door and walk away, then look into it, it'll be dark, Nick said as he gave a scroll a kick of his foot. It crumbled under the slight touch. So, this place operated like it would in a video game, huh? In fact, it gave me a dungeon crawl vibe. I haven't played any games recently, but I'd been into Diablo when I was younger. I thought of the spider boss in that game and suppressed a shudder. Nick would never bring me somewhere dangerous without a warning first. But if we ran into anything besides a spider, I was out of there. As we cleared each room without any sign of Gregory, I contained the urge to ask Nick some questions about the place. This place clearly was something he didn't want to talk about. No matter how much I wanted to know what went on down here, I would respect his privacy. I didn't count the rooms, but we circled back to the one we started in. I opened the back door, stepped inside, and nearly tripped over a crude vase. How big is this place? I asked, wondering how far these back doors went. I have no idea. That wasn't comforting. If we didn't find Gregory, we may need to come back later. Nick was off work for a bit longer, and I could take some time off for him, weaving around the vases. I went to the next door. At least the rooms weren't all that big. I didn't want to break or touch anything, but Nick didn't appear to care. Our ribbon caught on a vase, tipping it over before I could catch it. It smashed, and I winced, expecting him to say something. Don't worry about it. Everything on the upper levels is where he stored the failures, Nick told me. It made me feel a little better about smashing something that looked old and might have had some value. Most of the rooms we searched were mostly empty after the vase room. When we entered a room with piles of what looked to be coal in the corner, Nick stopped to look at them. The air felt like a tomb, the way he looked at the discarded rocks. It was as if he really was looking at a burial site. My suspicions of him being an imperfect philosopher's stone were validated a little bit more after seeing how he acted. Were these stones the discarded practice that eventually led to Nick being created? I didn't ask, and he didn't offer any information. I lost track of how many layers we'd gone through when the worst happened. Nick and I got separated. It was neither of our faults, just something we couldn't predict. I was standing in an almost empty stone room when I looked over to him. Do you have the time? I mean, how long do you want to look for? We can do one floor A. My train of thought was cut off as the brickwork under my feet shifted. In a blink of an eye, I was standing, then I was falling. Nick grabbed at the ribbon, keeping us connected in a desperate attempt to save me. He was dragged down, his body hitting a more stable area of the floor. The ribbon caught and my arms jerked up, supporting my entire body weight. For a moment, I felt my shoulder pop. Then the ribbon snapped from my weight and being against rough bricks. I heard Nick call my name. I couldn't reply. A small stone came falling with me and smashed into my head above my temple. It knocked me out for a few minutes.